Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping straight into a mythic fable about stolen fire today. And let me tell you, it reveals a profoundly dark, but honestly absolutely fascinating reality about human nature. You know, we love to picture human progress as this neat, straight line shooting upward, right? Like it's just a story of constant enlightenment. But the sources we're unpacking today completely flip that script. They force us to take a hard look in the mirror and confront this highly volatile, dualistic force that's just living inside all of us.
So, here's the big thing I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we go through this. Is human nature really defined by its innocence? Or is it actually defined by its inherent capacity for perversion? Stick a pin in that. Because what we're about to uncover is going to completely shatter that romanticized, picture-perfect idea of human progress.
Okay, part 1. The Stolen Spark.
The story kicks off with a classic setup. We've got a nameless traveler climbing these brutal frozen peaks to literally steal a spark from the sun itself, a theft the text calls ignis fatuus, all to save this dying, freezing valley. And the crazy thing? He didn't ask for a single thing in return. No payment, no worship. He just dropped this one simple, profound truth. Heat, rightly used, forges. Heat, wrongly used, only burns. And for an entire generation, the villagers totally got it. They took this flame, built hearths, and finally warmed their children through winters that used to be a literal death sentence. For that first generation, the fire was exactly what it looked like. Just pure, tangible mercy.
But man, here's where we hit an absolutely incredible philological twist in our source material. Check out the bilingual fracture of the word gift. In English, as we all know, it means a thing freely given, right? But in German, with zero exceptions, it means poison. And it turns out both meanings actually descend from the exact same root sense of a medical dose. Think about that for a second. A dose isn't a cure, and it isn't a toxin until you know the measure. And more importantly, the hand that's administering it. It's this beautiful, tragic way of showing us that every single offering, depending entirely on who is holding it, is also a toxin just waiting to be unleashed. The fire was always a dose. It was just waiting for a measure.
All right, moving into part 2, when the cold subsides.
So decades go by. A child eventually climbs the mountain to honor that original traveler, bringing along a polished shield to reflect the thriving valley below. But when the traveler, who's now become a sage, looks into that reflection, he doesn't see those glowing, happy forges. Instead, he drops this incredibly chilling truth. He reveals he actually gave them the fire as a test. And here's the kicker. The true test of our character isn't how we act when we're desperately struggling to survive in the freezing cold. No, it's what we do when that hardship is totally removed. The real question is, who do we become when the cold no longer gives us an excuse for our cruelty? Because what the sage actually saw reflected in that shield was a wall of ash. Just this massive pillar of smoke standing over the valley like a second mountain, with homes and fields completely up in flames. Instead of using their brand new security and warmth to build endless prosperity, the villagers weaponized it. The second the ice was conquered, they just turned on each other. And the text points out this deeply dark irony. Human nature, once you strip away all the excuses and hand it ultimate security, can actually be colder and far more brutal than the literal ice they were running from.
Which brings us to part 3, the choice of the arsonist.
So how on earth did this society fall to ash when there wasn't even an external enemy? There was no foreign tyrant, no invading army bursting through the gates. The destruction came entirely from within. It was a total internal failure. You had that first generation using honest labor at the hearths, sure, but as the decades passed, a slow, cowardly rot set in. It was fueled by these tiny, everyday failures of nerve, an incremental descent that eventually built that giant wall of ash. We see this terrifying pivot in human behavior here. On one side, you have the smith. The smith represents disciplined labor, sitting down for counsel, using your words to actually solve complex problems. But on the other side, you have the arsonist. And the arsonist represents quick destruction, throwing torches and reaching for weapons. Our sources suggest that human nature actually naturally gravitates away from that difficult, disciplined path of the smith. We just default to the quick, incredibly easy, destructive path of the arsonist.
It's wild, because the total ruin of this valley was built on these tiny, almost invisible increments. I mean, nobody woke up one morning, stretched, and decided, I'm going to be a supervillain today. They just started settling little grudges with torches instead of words. A boundary dispute here or there got settled with cinder instead of counsel. One by one, they literally just declined the hard work of remaining a smith. And this is fascinating. The text points out that when humans flinch from their own potential, when we lack the guts for real self-overcoming, we tend to twist our morality. We pervert it, and actually reframe that cowardly flinching as some kind of virtue.
Then, when the sage actually confronts them about this ruin, a voice from the smoke calls out with this quote, "Talk about a masterclass in deflecting blame." The villagers are basically yelling back, "Hey, we didn't break your gift, we just discovered what else it could do." It so perfectly captures that volatile human instinct to weaponize the very tools meant for our growth, and then turn around and blame the tool itself for being so easily weaponized. They're crying out that it's simply the nature of the metal, completely ignoring the fact that it was their hands doing the forging.
Let's look at part 4, decay toward ash.
That deflection of responsibility we just talked about, that is the underlying philosophical engine of everything we're discussing today, the unsublimated will to power. The text actually uses a very specific German term for this, Untergang. Now, if you're a Nietzsche reader, you probably know this as a deliberate going under in order to evolve into a higher state of being. But the source here deliberately flips that on its head. Because these villagers left their will to power completely unmastered, they suffered an unchosen, highly tragic decay toward ash. They basically just collapsed inward.
And that brings us to the ultimate tragedy for the sage. Honestly, it's the tragedy for any creator, inventor, or teacher. You can hike up the mountain, you can suffer the blisters, steal the fire from the sun, and freely hand this incredible, life-saving gift to a freezing valley. But you can never, ever control the hand that wields it. The fire itself, it's always neutral. It is strictly the human hand that decides whether it's going to hold a plowshare or a sword over that flame.
So let's pull all these threads together. When our will goes unsublimated, it reflects right back at us like a demon's leer in the mirror of the soul. And the worst part is, innocent new generations end up inheriting a corruption that they didn't design, and frankly, they can't even see yet. The stark reality this explainer leaves us with is this: human nature is not some beautiful garden that just flourishes on its own. Not at all. It is a highly volatile force. It demands constant, vigilant tending by a teacher. Because without that oversight, the stolen fires of our progress will inevitably turn into weapons of ruin. The seeds of truth are just way too easily bent by our own fear.
As we wrap up this look into the dualistic poison, I really want you to think about how this applies way, way beyond some ancient mythical valley. Take a hard look at the technology, the tools, the massive systems we're building today. If it's true that every single gift is also a poison depending on the hand that holds it, what weapons are we quietly forging right now, with the fires of our own progress? Are we genuinely doing the incredibly hard work of the smith, or are we, slowly, through tiny little failures of nerve, just handing the torch over to the arsonist? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder that flame.